You're never as bad as you think you are. And so keep things into perspective, drive for results, but do it in a collaborative way and bring people with you.
Welcome to Work Inspired, a podcast where leaders in business, commercial real estate, technology, and design come together to discuss change, challenge, and opportunity in today's professional world. This show is powered by BOS, a leader in commercial interiors. The team of workplace experts at BOS is equipped and ready to help you navigate the path to your next workspace. Whether you're a seasoned leader or just starting out in your career, you're going to learn something new today. So sit back, relax, enjoy, and get ready to work inspired. On this podcast, we talk to so many different guests in so many different industries, and they're people with all different types of experience, from heads of marketing, which I get really excited about, technologists, futurists, CIOs, COOs. But when we talk to a people leader, a head of human resources, I get really, really excited because these professionals truly understand how place impacts people and how space impacts teams. And on today's episode, we are so fortunate to have an incredible guest, someone who leads thousands and thousands and thousands of people across many different locations. Mark Griffin from BJ's Wholesale is the Chief Human Resources Officer, and we get to talk to him today. So let's not waste any more time. Let's dive into the conversation. Work Inspired starts right now. So excited to talk to you about what you and the team at BJ's are doing. Thanks for being on Work Inspired.
Thanks, George. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
So before we begin, I always like to ask the guests to kind of give the Cliff Notes version of their professional journey. How did you get to where you're at today, and what were some of the milestones along the way?
Yeah, so I started with Fleet Bank in the early 90s and spent about 8 or 9 years there, and then moved on to healthcare retail with CVS Health, and spent about 18 years there. Wrapped it up in June of 18, and moved on to be the chief HR officer at BJ's Wholesale Club, where I am today. It's been a great journey. I've been in executive human resources roles for the majority of my career, with concentration on acquisitions and mergers, as well as helping grow companies both organically or through acquisition growth. And it's been a great journey. I would say that what's helped me continue to develop and to continue to grow and advance my career is being an authentic and empathetic leader. I mean, I think that translates to any business you're in. Growing a team, having a strong team allows you to do what you need to do, and they do what they need to do. And so that has been a prescription that's worked for me over the years, George.
Excellent. And tell me a little bit about BJ's as an organization. I'm in the Midwest, and I wasn't as familiar with how large you are. I think it's probably because of your large presence on the East Coast. But give our listeners a little bit of an overview of the company and how many employees you've got.
Yeah, so we're primarily on the East Coast, as you mentioned. We have about 32,000 employees. We have about 227 clubs, our stores. And we're about a $15+ billion company from a sales standpoint. So as far out west we are is we're in Michigan. And so we have lots of opportunities to continue to grow in the domestic United States.
Definitely. And that's a large company. So 32,000 employees and with a lot of different locations. What is the culture at BJ's? What is it like to work there?
Yeah, we've got a great culture in the organization, and you think about it, it manifests itself in 3 ways. One, we have a home office or headquarters culture. We also have what's built out in the distribution centers in terms of culture, and then in our stores, our clubs. Mm-hmm. And what I like to say is there's a company culture, but there's also a culture that each leader creates within their domain. So we spent a lot of time talking and coaching and working with our club managers who run our clubs, because they really set the culture every day of how the club operates. But from a company perspective, we put our team members first. And during the pandemic, our culture has been the health and welfare and safety of our team members and our members, our customers, is what we first talk about every day. And that's been critical. And so I think the pandemic has kind of allowed us to, develop a culture of better communication, quicker communication, and I think a higher emphasis on being open to hear the needs of our team members.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting thing when you've got an organization that relies on in-person service or workers like you have at your clubs, and then you've got your corporate office, maybe not so much a need to be in person. How did you handle that? Outside of the required mandated lockdowns, how did you handle the concept of those that didn't need to come into the office being at home or being at work? And how are you kind of navigating that as now we come hopefully out, we're coming out of the pandemic, at least coming out of the government mandates. What is it like to work in the corporate side of BJ's?
Yeah, so as you know, our clubs have never stopped. They've never stopped being open, and so our frontline team members have always gone to work, and we've worked really hard to keep them healthy and safe. Same with the distribution center. When you talk about the corporate office, it is a different animal. We've got over 1,000 people under one roof, so you can imagine if an outbreak happened, how much that can impact the business.
Right.
We over a weekend. We went from a company that was traditionally not a very flexible work at home, work arrangement company to 100% remote. And so now we find ourselves 100% remote. And what we started doing is having town hall meetings every other week on Zoom with 1,000 people on there and just kind of talking about the business and what's happening and answering questions and how are you doing at home and what else do you need to keep things going? And so we've, basically been remote for about 2 years. And we've had, 2 of the years that the business has grown the fastest in probably the company history. And, what we did not lose focus on is while the corporate headquarters was working from home, our focus is making sure our club and our member-facing team members in the DC and in the clubs are well taken care of. And I think it allowed us to focus on them even more because we had some less distractions going on and we had a high level of, concentration on making that work. So we're now back in a hybrid environment, but we were 100% remote for a period of time.
I think lots of organizations are trying to figure out what the right recipe is for their hybrid future. Hybrid seems like it's here to stay. Have you guys put any plans in place for the short or maybe even the long term as far as what hybrid looks like at BJ's?
Yeah. So again, hybrid at BJ's only really focuses on the corporate office, as you would imagine, because it's critical to be face to face in our business.
Yes.
So with a corporate office, we are a couple days in the office and the rest of the week remote. The interesting thing there is that we specified what those days are. So on Mondays and Tuesdays, everybody's in the office together. And that allows us to really change our schedule and our agenda to have all the meetings that are critical for face-to-face, whether it's staff meetings, strategic meetings, cross-functional department meetings to drive projects. Those are all scheduled Mondays and Tuesdays. And then Wednesday through Friday, you're on Zoom and you're back to kind of a remote environment. If you need meetings, of course, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, the office is always open. But we're building this again with the focus of how do we best serve our team members in our clubs that are dealing with our customers every day.
One thing that I've always thought was interesting before the pandemic was how the adoption of video conferencing, Zoom, Teams, whatever, had not really taken off that much in a lot of organizations. I'm interested to know, with a company like yours that's got a corporate office and then a lot of different locations, what was the connectivity like between corporate and your clubs? Were you guys doing Zoom calls before the pandemic, or has the pandemic kind of increased the adoption of those types of technologies to maybe create better connectivity between the two teams?
There was some of that going on pre-pandemic, but George, it was driven to a much higher level during the pandemic. Like many things, the pandemic drove companies to implement things much faster, quicker, and with less kind of bureaucracy to get things done because they need to. And so if you think about certain business programs like Omni, buy online, pick up in club, curbside, all those things, really jump started fast when COVID kind of hit across the world. In terms of the technology, we were scratching the surface on that before, and we really had to move fast, jump in, and have everybody wired and connected. And I think with our stores, our clubs, that's been great with our management team, but we do rely on our management team to meet with their team members during huddles throughout the day when a shift changes. So we still have, I think, a combination of electronic communication to the management team of the stores, and then they do more face-to-face communication.
Yeah, and that's something that we're hearing too, especially with teams that were fully remote, like your corporate team was for a couple of years. The kind of the burnout that's existing now with the digital meetings, with these face-to-face meetings that take place basically across two computers. Are you seeing that as people come back into the office from the corporate side on those Mondays and Tuesdays, that there's a renewed sense of energy, or are you tapping into the kind of the ability to promote the culture at BJ's in those moments, or the training and development? What are kind of like the benefits that you're seeing of being back together? And maybe these are some things that you were able to see were maintained at the club level where they had to be together during the pandemic, but now you're able to kind of re-engage those initiatives at the corporate level because you're able to do the hybrid and have some in-person opportunities.
Yeah, the answer is yes across the board. I think those examples that you just outlined are exactly what happened. The engagement at the club level and the distribution center level has continued, obviously, because they've been face to face. On the corporate side, people are very excited to be in. I think there was some folks like, all right, is this going to work out being back, in the office? How will I stay safe and COVID free and all of that? But, as I talk to team members in our corporate office, there is a level of excitement, heightened energy. I see people, hugging people in the hallways. Nice to see you. I haven't seen you in a while. And new hires, oh my God, this is what you look like in person. And it's fun. It's fun. It's engaging. I think to be competitive, you need to be hybrid, right? I think, the 5 day a week in the workplace, some companies want to migrate to that. Some have already done it. It's a difficult thing to do because I think people want the flexibility. And I think organizations, for the most part, have proven that they can be very effective and productive in a hybrid environment. So I could tell you our team members love the days they're in together. I think they also appreciate the days that they work remote.
Sure. Have you had to do anything to incentivize people to come back in? Have there been any drivers that have worked significantly well to make people say, hey, yeah, that was worth my trip to the office?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I think it goes back to how we design the 2 days in the office, being everybody in on the first 2 days of the week, Mondays and Tuesdays. So I heard from a lot of my peers out in the industry of, hey, we're back 2 days a week or 3 days a week, and we let the team members decide which days they want, and because we want flexibility. But then the problem that you start to see is, well, you've got people saying, hey, I drove all the way to the office and I'm doing the same thing that I do at home. The people I need to collaborate with or meet with face to face they come in on a different day I do, right? And so by lining that up, it does limit some of the flexibility in terms of which days, but it puts everybody together on those 2 days. So everybody's there. And that's when you want to book all those meetings. I think it only works, George, if you actually change the way you think in terms of scheduling events during the week, and you push the face-to-face, the critical meetings that have to be in person to drive collaboration, drive relationship building and networking, drive those to the Mondays and Tuesdays, and have everybody launch off of that for the remainder of the week.
Yeah, I completely agree. And we're seeing the same thing with lots of different organizations. If you don't have the people in the place, when people get there, they're like, well, why am I here? And there may be some benefits like technology or different amenities, but for the most part, they're coming to have those collaboration opportunities with with teams that either they're used to working with or that they don't usually work with, and those accidental opportunities I think are just as important. Did you guys have to do anything different to your space itself to accommodate the increased amount of meetings or collaboration opportunities, or were you pretty well set up before the pandemic and you just needed to bring people back in?
No, it's really the first part of that. We are actually moving our corporate office to another building, which is being completely built out, brand new on the inside. It's going to actually overall save money on an annual basis. So it's going to cost less. It's going to be more efficient. But it's going to be designed for hybrid work specifically. It's going to be designed for the collaboration and enhance kind of the dialogue between our team members and between departments. And so our current building is not designed well for hybrid workforce. And so we're very, fortunate to be able to move to another building that's going to be specifically designed for this work.
It's interesting. We're seeing, heads of people leaders and head of human resources has always been a stakeholder in space decisions because they do impact people. But we're seeing more so than ever before them having a real seat at the table making decisions as it regards workspace and how the workspace is designed and some of the real estate decisions. Is that the same within your organization? Have you seen, and you've been there since 2018, but I guess with this upcoming move, are you one of the key team members that's helping to kind of navigate that process and make the decisions?
Oh, totally. I think, HR, real estate, planning, the planning and strategy group. All of those groups come together on this. This is a major move to do it flawlessly, to do it with high engagement. Everybody worries when you have to move, right? And even though we're only moving a few miles away from where we are today, the change management aspect, I think, is where HR really plays a big role, George, in terms of communication, education, and putting actions in place that makes the transition smoother and lets people understand the facts, right? So what it is and what it isn't, and how you're still going to be safe if we have another outbreak of COVID in the country. How is this open collaborative floor plan going to still provide safety from COVID? And so all of those things I think are really important to get our team members excited about the move and not afraid of it.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned change communication because we've seen over and over again that an effective communication strategy is probably more important than the actual measures you're putting in place. If people feel like they've been there, they have the information, they know what's going on. That uncertainty is what drives a lot of fear, right? So I think that that's an incredibly important thing right now, especially if you're going through a move. But most companies are going through some form of a refresh or a reconfiguration or a reprioritization of how they're working. And so I think communication is so important right now. As it relates to hiring, there's a lot going on in the world for the war for talent, however you want to define it. But it's tough to keep people and it's tough to find people right now. What's some advice that you've got for people leaders or organizations in general that are looking to retain their top talent and maybe find and attract some new people?
Yeah, that is a great question and probably the thing that keeps me up at night. We have a great talent acquisition team who does a tremendous job, and it is difficult. I think the culture's one way to start. If you start to get a reputation of being a really good place to work from the standpoint of growth opportunities, company is on a growth track, and also people feel valued and respected. That's a big one. I know that sounds like a bunch of buzzwords, but it really is a core of it. I think a lot of people leave, if they don't like their manager, and so the development courses we can provide. I think our talent management team does a great job around how to be an effective leader, authentic leader. A lead with a positivity and all that is helping. In terms of going out into the marketplace, you got to be creative.
Hmm.
You've got to use networks that you probably haven't thought of before. You've got to use advertising. You've got to tap some shoulders on people that normally would be an active candidate, but now they're a passive candidate. You have to pay right. I mean, comp is a piece that's moving fast. And I think just the last thing is everything around the labor market is moving fast, whether it's pay rates, compensation, whether it's preferences of work schedules, and we can get back into hybrid, right? So everybody's looking for something different, and it's changing quickly. So you got to kind of understand what needs to change, and then change quickly with it.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. I just saw an article yesterday that was some statistic around how a significant amount of the people that changed jobs within the last year are already rethinking another change or thinking about another change. So I think there is just a lot of turnover in general. But you're right, culture, training and development, that's a big one, and I think that's something that maybe suffered a little bit throughout the pandemic, because there's such a value of being together and learning from one another, and mentorship. I think it's just something that's maybe more easily done in person. But I also think that there's probably some new technologies and new services available where it can be done effectively in a remote environment. And we talked about Zoom a little bit and a couple technologies, but are there any technologies that you guys have either onboarded or discovered over the last couple of years that you're excited about moving forward?
Yeah, I'll mention one in particular that kind of hits the chord that you were talking about, George. It's Corp U, and it's a program that's a platform that allows learning across a distance environment and a remote environment. We brought it in prior to COVID because all of our club management team are all over our footprint, from New England down to Florida, out to Michigan, and we wanted to be able to bring them all together and have training with them together, but not just a bunch of PowerPoints. It needed to be interactive, and it needed to be something different. And so we were able to do that. It's gotten great reviews. Then COVID and the pandemic hit, and we've used that in all other parts of the organization. And so you can get online. There's a portion of it that is self-paced, which works great. And then there's a capstone event at the end of the week with a professor from a business school kind of wrapping it up. And it's allowed us to pick and customize courses that are really meaningful to our culture and where we want to be. And it's a great way to connect with everybody when you can't get people under one roof.
Sure. Yeah, I love that. We talked about a lot of things. I think I think there's a lot to look forward to in the coming year. But what's one thing that you're excited about, whether it's personally or at your company, that you're kind of looking forward to in the next 12 months?
So we've invested a ton of money back into the business in terms of growing it faster. And so that's fun. It's fun when you have the ability, you have the capital, you have the leadership to really push that and drive it. And with that means, new talent, promotions internally, development of talent to really take us to the next level. And so from an HR perspective, seeing that talent come in and step up to the challenge and actually hit those results has been really, really great. And then watching the HR team kind of develop along that track and become even better business partners to help us hit those goals is very rewarding. I'm very proud of the team, and it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun when you're growing,
Oh yeah. I love talking to companies that have I mean, the pandemic was terrible for everybody, but some industries experienced an incredible amount of growth during the pandemic. And it's usually a different type of a conversation than when you talk to an industry that was impacted the other way. But congratulations on that success. And yeah, I'd be excited too. I'd like to ask, especially leaders like yourself that have had a really, I think, exceptional career. I mean, you were with CVS for a long time. And you've got a ton of experience. What's some advice that you would leave behind if you were retiring today? What's something you would tell someone you were mentoring as far as professional success is concerned?
Well, that's a good question. And I would say it's a couple things. One is never forget where you came from and never forget what the frontline workers are dealing with. Never lose that perception and perspective of what's really happening, because that's really where you need to help people the most. Another one's a little kind of phrase in my mind is, when things are going really, really well, you're not as good as you think you are. And when things are having trouble or not going as well, you're never as bad as you think you are. And so keep things into perspective, drive for results, but do it in a collaborative way and bring people with you.
That is very good advice. And in fact, I heard we had an interview yesterday with another guest that had very similar advice about perspective, and maybe looking outside the immediate moment to have a little bit more clarity. Great advice. Final question. Is there a resource that you could recommend? I know we've talked about a couple during this conversation already, but is there a book, a podcast, a networking group? Is there something that's been helpful to you in your career that you could recommend to others?
Yeah. So I think especially on this topic, it's changing so fast that I don't necessarily think, reading a bunch of information that is a year or two old makes a lot of sense, because it's changing too fast. So if you're interested in kind of what's driving, work inspiration, what's driving work schedules and hybrid and all that kind of stuff, it's staying current in the moment. And I think there's a lot of good white papers out there. I read some from Stanford, McKinsey, BCG. The consulting firms have some great stuff that's kind of fresh off the press. But what's helped me the most is talking to my peers in the industry. And we have a group of peers that are heads of HR in the New England, New York, New Jersey area. And we partner together and share what we're doing. And we share the learnings and what's working and what is not. And so my advice would be, if there are fresh materials, certainly that's helpful, but nobody's cracked the code on this. And by the way, the code's changing. And so I think asking people that are in the heat of it is your best advice. And like, how are you dealing with this? What's working, what isn't? Because I think things are going to change 100 times before the industry lands on what hybrid really means.
You're spot on. You're a wise man, Mark. BJ's is lucky to have you, and we have been so fortunate to have you on this show. Thanks for sharing your insight and your perspective. It's been such a pleasure to talk with you.
My pleasure as well. A lot of fun. Thanks, George. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this conversation, please take a moment to rate our show. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the Work Inspired podcast so that you don't miss any of the incredible guests we have planned for upcoming episodes. We'll continue to find the best and brightest minds in business so that you can learn, grow, and succeed, and so that we can all work inspired. Work Inspired is brought to you by BOS, a leader in commercial working environments and a Hayworth best-in-class dealership. Experience our 360 approach and discover the team, tools, and techniques required to navigate the complexity of your next workspace at BOS.com. If you have ideas, feedback, or would like to be featured on our show, please email podcast@BOS.com. Thank you for listening. This has been a Workspace digital production. If you're interested in launching a podcast at your organization, please email info@workspace.digital for a free consultation.